review fat, and then we're going to move on to cholesterol, and then we'll move on to protein. So we do have a lot to do today. When we talk about fat, I have my notes on the screen. We have to answer those 7 questions that I told you guys about the first week of class. What is it made of? How much we got to eat? What's the function? All those fun questions. So I'm going to say the question, and I want you guys either to answer in the chat room, or you could verbally state it out loud. Okay? So please participate. What is fat made of? You guys can answer in the chat room, talk.
Triglycerol.
Okay, it is glycerol and fatty acids. Anastasia has it right in the chat room. Julia as well has it right in the chat room. The triglycerides, that is the name we call fat that's floating in the blood. But it is made of glycerol and fatty acids, okay? And what is the functions, plural, functions of fat? There's about 5 of them. So if you want to just say one or type 1.
It insulates the body. Sorry.
Insulates the body. In the chat room, what am I seeing here? I'm trying to get, and provides energy. It protects the organs, insulates the body. 2 more were left out. One of them isn't written here, and I need to include that. It does carry the vitamins. Good job, Anastasia and Melissa. It makes up our brain and the central nervous system. It also will protect, therefore, it will protect our brain, but also protects our heart from disease. So the good fat will protect our brain and our heart from diseases, okay? All right, so we know the function of it, so that tells us why we have to eat it. What percentage of our diet should be fat? So no more than 30% would be the correct answer. And Anastasia gave the answer that I always give. I like one number. I say 20%. But plus or minus, if you want to go with that one number, 20%, that's fine. Just say like plus or minus 10, you're good. Plus or minus 10, you're good off of that 20%. Good job. Okay. How many calories in 1 gram of a fat molecule? Very good. You all got that one, 9. So you can see it's a lot more than carbs and protein. Carbs and protein will give us 4 calories, where the fat will give us 9. All right. And we're moving on now to the different types of fat, okay? So that there, I don't know if that's glitching on your screen or not. There's 3 types of fat. You can see them in bold print on your screen. I'm not going to make you type those out. But saturated, unsaturated, and polyunsaturated. Of these 3 types, which are the best ones to eat? Poly is correct. The polyunsaturated fats are the best ones to eat. Now, those of you very active, thank you in the chat room. List some foods that you personally eat that you believe has polyunsaturated fats in them. Okay, we've got Melissa saying fish. We've got Michael saying walnuts. Both of those are correct. Anybody else eat polyunsaturated fats? Almonds, good. Maybe you don't eat them now, but after this lesson, you're like, oh, I better get myself some of those. Avocado does. I'm reading the chat room. Salmon and tuna for sure. Avocado, yes. Eggs, Angelica, the eggs would have it if it was fortified into the eggs. So what fortified means is it's not naturally there. However, we could put it in there, like the producers could put it in there kind of as a supplementation. And what they do with the eggs, it really, think of it this way. If you're eating an animal, the quality of what you're getting from that animal is dependent on the animal's diet. So with the eggs, if that chicken is eating a diet that's high in omega-3 fatty acids, then, when they produce the eggs, it's going to be in there. You can read the labels of products like eggs, cereals, maybe where else might it be? Yogurts. It might be in there. You read the labels because it'll say on the product like fortified with omega-3 fatty acids. It might be worth the extra cost. It's usually like another $1 per dozen to get that. But if we're talking about maintaining the integrity of our brain, so we're not going to get memory loss, we're not going to get dementia, we're not going to get mental illnesses like depression, it might be worth that. And we also know the omega-3s improve the heart health. Okay. So if you know that in your family you've got some risk factors for either a cognitive decline, cognitive illnesses, depression, or heart disease, it might be worth finding one way to get the omega-3s in your diet. Okay. Nuts and seeds are great snacks. Does anyone remember the one type of seed that I mentioned in class Tuesday that has the most omega-3s in it? It starts with an F. Anybody? Flax seeds is correct. Flaxseed is correct. Flaxseed, the bag might be expensive, however, it'll last you a long time. I typically buy only 1 or 2 bags per year, and it's like $7 a bag. I think it's like a pound or something. Throw it in your smoothies, oatmeal, cereal, salads. I think people omit putting different things in their salads. They just think it should be lettuce, or they just think it should be veggies. But you could put nuts and seeds. You could put fruit. You could put healthy things in that salad. Angelica says she adds to chia seed pudding. So you put the flaxseed in the chia seed pudding. So that would be interesting because now you've got 2 great sources of omega-3s. Great. Okay. Omega-3s are the best. Do know that omega-6 are also polyunsaturated fats. The omega-6s we find more in beef, pork, milk, eggs. So we're not really low on that omega-6 intake. The reason I keep stressing omega-3 is I just don't think a lot of people are getting that one, right? It's coming from dark green leafy vegetables. It's coming from whole grains too. Remember, when we look at that whole grain, we got about 1 gram of omega-3 in the germ. So we're just kind of deficient as a country in the omega-3. So consciously think about eating that type. All right, so the OK type is the unsaturated fat. The unsaturated fat is from plants. Doesn't necessarily hurt us. It's not going to give us huge benefits like the omega-3s will. And we really think about that as plant oils is where the monounsaturated fats are located. The one that we want to watch out the most would be saturated fat. And you guys, tell me some foods you eat with the saturated fats in them. Butter is correct. I put some butter on my children's toast this morning with a side of blueberries. That's what they had. Coconut oil. Yes, we realize that coconut oil has some saturated fat in it. Yusuf asked me a question about supplementations. I'm going to give you my synopsis of my best educated advice about supplements. If you can't eat them, then that would be a good option. And I would say that with any vitamin or mineral. If we cannot eat the nutrient for whatever reason, then supplementation would be the next best option. Obviously, it's better than not having them at all. But when we eat the foods, we tend to get a more pure form of the nutrient. The reason I say that is supplements don't have to really be accurate in their labeling and their claims. Supplement companies could mislead us and say that they have this amount or that amount, and there's no legal ramifications for that. The other reason is when we eat it, the nutrient like omega-3 fatty acid tends to come with other nutrients that are really important too. So we're also getting other vitamins and minerals that are important to the body, some of which help absorb the nutrient better. We know for sure iron and vitamin C work hand in hand, and typically they'll be present in the same type of food. I believe vitamin D and calcium is another combination. They help absorb each other, so you're going to get more out of that rather than a supplement. Okay? All right. Food tends to cost less than supplements too. That's always a benefit. All right, so saturated fats. We have butter, coconut, oil, and cake. Anything made with butter, yes, cake would be one of them. Anything that comes from an animal. You guys, the meat you're eating. If you had ground meat, you know when you buy a package of ground meat, it'll say a certain percentage. It'll say like 90% ground meat or 85% ground meat. The other percentage is fat. So if you're getting a package that says 90% ground meat, 90% is protein, and the other 10% is saturated fat. That's what that number means. You know, the fat around steak, pork chops, that's all saturated. Any dairy product. So when we're talking about milk, ice cream, yogurt, has some saturated fat. Now, dairy products could take it out. You know, like skim milk, they took the fat out. Yogurts may do that too. They may actually take the fat out before they put it on the shelf. Does anyone have questions between the three types of natural fats? Does anyone want to give me the recommendation? If you were meeting somebody for the first time and they knew you took a nutrition class and they said, hey, I've heard some conflicting information about fat. Should I eat it or not? What would you say to them? Anybody brave enough to answer? So you just said, yes, you should eat fat, right? Would you go into a tangent like I do? No, I mean, would you go into an explanation of what kind of fats they should eat? And Odie said we need it for energy. Yes, we do need it for energy. Anybody else? Why is it so important to eat? Well, Talia, you said you're torn on this. I don't want any person not eating fat. I should say it this way too. I don't think any person should not eat any of the nutrients. We have to have all six. We have to have all six if we want to be healthy. You know, people play with their intake thinking, well, if I cut fat, I'll lose weight. If I cut carbs, I'll lose weight. If I cut, you know, this, I'll lose weight. You know, that's not really, it might be effective, but it's not really healthy to do it that way. And Talia's talking about keto. Did you want to comment on that? I know you just raised your hand.
Yeah, I forgot. So that video that you had sent us a little while ago about like insulin and different things, one of the things it mentioned was like ketones and ketosis. I think that's what it said. It had me thinking about like the keto diets and things. Like it seems to be like they replace a lot of the carbohydrates with fat, correct?
Are you talking about the keto diet?
Yeah.
So yeah, the keto diet, I think they're really high on proteins, and then the fat would be the next nutrient, but I think they try to cut carbs.
Okay, because like a lot of people, I just, when it comes to fat, it's like I'm confused, like I was saying, of how to advise someone who is overall, you know, healthy when it comes to using fat. Unfortunately, especially in my family, and you know, as we studied, African Americans, Black Americans have, you know, a higher obesity rate. When it comes to fat, I'm kind of torn as to what to say, because it's typically someone of my color. A lot of people are dealing with from their genes and different things. Just
right. Well, I would encourage you to make sure that a person is eating all the nutrients, but that they have the education. And Anastasia said it at the same time I did. Anastasia is perfect. The same time I was going to say this. We have to educate them so they know the difference between a good form of fat and a fat that will hurt them. The same thing with carbs. We want to educate them so they know what are the good forms of carbs we should be eating and which ones we don't want to eat as much. And that really is key. So education is key. We don't want to say carbs are bad, fats are bad. We want to say, you know, we need a moderate amount of all of them, and these are good options for you to pick from. And I would never tell someone, don't ever eat your favorite food ever again. We can't do that. And they'll slam the door in our face and they won't want to be our friends anymore. So we could identify great options for them to pick from, but also let them have their favorite food too, and whatever that might be. Hopefully it's something on the better range of nutrients, but if it's not, that's okay. You know, they can still have, like my kid begs me all the time, buy him a frozen pizza. Well, we don't have it every day. We don't have it every week, but you know, once in a while I'll put in a frozen pizza for him. Okay. So I hope that makes sense to you guys, and you're going to form your own opinion with the education you get in the class. And the cool thing about nutrition is everyone is different because of their background and their culture and their genetics. So you're going to get a guide of numbers and nutrients that you could craft and apply that to a specific person. We don't want, as nutritionists or individuals with a nutrition education, we don't want to say this is the diet you have to follow and that fits everyone, because that's not going to work either. We're going to get guidelines and we're going to get percentages and ideas, and then help a person based on their background and genetics and demographics, help that person make better choices for themselves. Okay. So when it comes to, and Anastasia, I really appreciate that comment, backing us, both of us backing each other up when we say that. When it comes to fat, we're going to say, yes, you should eat fat, but I want you to eat the good types, because most people don't even realize there are good types of fat. Most people think fat is bad and it's going to make me fat. But if we start identifying how little amount of good fat is in the foods, but yet it's essential to eat that, right? We're only getting a gram of healthy fats when we talk about a whole grain. We're only getting a few grams when we talk about that being in fish or nuts and seeds. So the weight of the grams is not a lot when we talk about polyunsaturated fats. And it won't give us a lot of calories, therefore. If we're like, I believe, you guys could look this up if you want, but I don't want to waste a lot of time. I believe there's only like 2 or 3 grams of healthy fat in oatmeal. So if we said a whole grain has 2 grams of healthy fat, well, that's only 18 calories, right? So if we ate a bowl of oatmeal, that's only 18 calories coming from fat. You know, other calories, maybe another 40 or 50 coming from carbs. But if we ate a whole stick of butter, now we're getting, what did we say? Who remembers how many calories in a stick of saturated butter? Was it something like 500 or something? So you're getting, when we eat something with saturated fat, you said 58 grams, right? It's 58 grams. If we're eating that whole thing times 9, therefore you're getting a ton of calories. And that's the problem with saturated fat, is it weighs a lot. There's a lot of quantity of grams that builds up the calorie intake a person has, and it predisposes them to obesity. So we could look, especially at snack foods, we could look at these snack foods, and if it is a large amount of saturated fat in terms of grams, maybe they want to have a small portion of that or replace that with something healthier. Okay. So we know that, anybody have questions? We should know the difference between these 3 types of fats now. And I would encourage you, definitely for yourself, try to get a couple of servings per week of this polyunsaturated. If you could do it every day, that would be great, but at least per week. When I was at Rush University, they were studying, and I believe this study is ongoing. There was an ongoing study on the south side of Chicago. They were investigating the diet intake of individuals that lived in Chicago and the prevalence of disease. One of the outcomes that will always stick with me is that individuals who had no intake of healthy fats had an elevated risk of Alzheimer's disease. If they were eating 2 or more servings of fish per week, they had lower incidence of that Alzheimer's disease. So it's 2 servings a week. More, fine, but whether you're getting it from nuts, seeds, whole grains, the fish, dark green leafy vegetables, sea vegetables, you've got to try to get that as a protective mechanism against diseases. Is there any other questions, or we'll move on? We know to avoid trans fat. I'm still at a crossroads if I need to continue to teach this. Trans fat is a processed fat. It basically was made illegal in, I don't know what year, maybe 5 years ago. The government says you can no longer put this in your processed foods because it's so bad, it's directly leading to cardiovascular disease. So they banned it from being added to any food. Yet I still see it on some labels. What it's called is, on a label, partially hydrogenated oil. So they're going to take a healthy fat. Typically, they'll take a monounsaturated fat. They pump hydrogen, they heat it to high temperatures, it transforms into this processed fat. They add it mostly to snack foods, flavoring foods, frostings, and it will preserve that product so it never spoils. It lasts forever. Think of the container of cake frosting you buy at a grocery store. That a lot of it is trans fat. Now, because it's supposedly illegal, they're replacing it with alternatives. Sometimes they're putting palm oil, which is a saturated fat. Historically, if we went back 100 years, what did our families use? They used butter. When they made frostings, when they made cookies, when they made anything that they were making, they used butter. Well, butter's expensive. So these companies thought, we got to figure out a way to lower our prices, yet preserve our food so we can sell them for a long period of time. So instead of using butter or a healthier oil, which cost a lot, they made up this trans fat. I told you guys I found a lot of it years ago in peanut butter. They would sell a jar of peanut butter for $1. And you'd think, oh, I'm getting a great deal. I can, this is a healthy food. I can use this. Well, it was causing disease, that food. I say I shouldn't teach it anymore, but yet just a few months ago, my cousin gave me a container of peanut butter she didn't want anymore. And she's like, oh, here, give this to your kids. And I came home and I read the label and it had partially hydrogenated oil in it. And, I don't know how they're getting away with that. And it was a name brand. I don't even know what I should do with that. I mean, I don't even want to give it to my dog because I'm afraid the dog will get sick. So read your labels. If it says, let me see if I can find it in here. Where's the partially hydrogenated oil? Look on the labels. Here it is. Hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil. Yeah, it is sad that the companies that are making our food are more concerned about profits and money versus health. They will try to get away with things. Two of the biggest culprits in the food supply system right now are processed, well, I should just say processed in general, but processed carbs, them trying to still sneak these hydrogenated oils into stuff is truly, truly sad. And then obviously the use of high amounts of sugar. I think the brand might have been like Skippy or something, but the brand names do make healthy peanut butter. You've got to read the labels. Typically it'll say natural on the front, but read your ingredient list. That's the only way to determine if it has it or not. So there are good versions of that Skippy peanut butter, and then there's versions that they're still using the hydrogenated oil. And people don't know that, Odie. I think that's a good comment. People don't have the education to know that that is bad for you. People make fun of me all the time. My family and friends, when they eat with me, I'll look at a label. Or I won't eat one thing, but I'll eat another. And they just, like my mother used to laugh. She's like, I don't even want to eat with you anymore. But the education obviously would give us the power to make better choices. And I can say, well, it's not like you're never going to eat partially hydrogenated oil again, but we certainly don't want to do that every day. You know, if you're at a birthday party and somebody brings out their birthday cake, have a slice of the cake. But we're not going to want to put that in our body every day. And so Odie is mentioning about lower income individuals maybe have an increased risk of obesity. And I think that definitely is a factor. Knowledge is power, right? I have been advocating for classes like I'm teaching to be in grade schools, definitely high school level. But you know, our educational system, they want to focus a lot on math and science. I think nutrition is a science. Personally, I think we should have lessons about this, but there's not. And so I'm not sure why our country continues to minimize preventative health and wellness, education specifically, when we are definitely going down the wrong path. Definitely going down the wrong path in terms of obesity and educating people. If we could educate people, lower income people, individuals who might be at a disadvantage in the educational system, they need to get this information. So I'm going on a tangent again, but we got to get back to class. You guys are going to be educated thoroughly by May, as long as you come to class, and then you obviously can make a difference in your community and your family. Odie, I used to take this information, obviously not as in depth as this, but I used to take fake food into kindergarten classes. And we would talk about what's healthy food to eat and why to eat healthy food. And I would have 5 buckets, and I would throw all the fun food on the plastic food on the floor, and they would run and they would pick up something, and I'd ask them, what did you just pick up, and what bucket do you want to put that in? And it would be fruit, vegetable, grains, proteins, and I think dairy foods, the 5 food groups. And I would just have them, and they loved it. And I remember telling them, you know, we talk to them in their own language, and you guys could do this too. Whether you're going to be nurses or, you know, nutritionists working with kids, teachers, you know, I would tell them, why are we eating healthy food? We always just simplistically, it's going to help you grow. You want to grow tall, you want to grow strong, and you want to feel good. You don't want to get sick. And the kids would understand it. I'm just reading the chat room really here. It says what we should do, Asian European schools do, and have a culinary basic skills class when it comes to food. Perfect. And you're saying that Asian and European schools do that, Anastasia? And I always used to think during lunchtime would be a good time to kind of talk about food options with kids, or especially in high school, cooking classes. Cooking classes. So in France, they talk to first graders about it and up. Interesting. Lunch counts as a class like PE. Perfect. You could talk about them, about what are the good choices. Now, there is some controversy in terms of school lunches right now, because the school lunch is not necessarily the healthiest options in every school. Some are doing better than others. Oh, wow. So the kids are making their own lunches and don't have lunch. Oh, that is really interesting. And that's in Asia and Europe? The kids make their own lunches and don't have lunch staff. The teachers teach it. Yeah, we need to do a better job with that. I don't know who's going to help me spread the word. Maybe you guys. We're going to move on to cholesterol because we have to get to that, and I'm going to share my screen. We have to get to cholesterol and protein still today, guys. So let's do cholesterol first. It shouldn't take us very long. It's pretty straightforward when we talk about cholesterol. I don't want to rush through anything, but I want to tell you guys, I'm sure each one of you knows someone who has high cholesterol. All the males on my dad's side of the family have high cholesterol. It is genetic. There are reasons why genetically a person would have high cholesterol. Other reasons for high cholesterol include diet, activity levels, believe it or not, stress, and lack of sleep is a stressor as well. So let's talk about this for a moment. Cholesterol is a molecule that's in any animal, including us, and it has a lot of functions. We need cholesterol. This is one of those things, we have to have it in our body. But if we get too much of the bad kind, that's when things start going wrong. So what does cholesterol do? Our liver will make cholesterol, and it makes it to carry fat around the body, to make cell membranes, to help form our central nervous system, and to help make hormones. So cholesterol is definitely needed. For our discussion today, we're going to really focus on the first one, which is that cholesterol carries fat around the body. When I talked to you guys about fat, we said that when fat is floating in your bloodstream, we call it a triglyceride. Cholesterol picks that up and carries it through the body. And depending on where it carries it, really tells us whether it's a good cholesterol or a bad cholesterol. So let's talk about the different types for a moment here. There's 3 types of cholesterol: high density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein, and very low density lipoprotein. We'll abbreviate them with these 3 or 4 short letters here. Okay. The high density lipoprotein is called HDL. This is the good cholesterol. High density lipoprotein, when it picks up the fat, it will carry it to the liver for elimination. It gets rid of the extra fat. That's what high density lipoprotein will do. The low density lipoprotein is the bad cholesterol. When it picks up the fat, it carries it through the body, continually circulating without ever leaving. So it never gets to that liver to get rid of it. Sometimes it gets stuck in an artery and starts to form plaque or clogs up that artery. And then very low density is just as bad. It's just as bad. So we go back to this slide here, the 3 types. I remember HDL is the good kind by saying it's happy. H stands for happy. So happy cholesterol is HDL. That's the good stuff. Picks up the fat, gets rid of it. The low density lipoprotein is lousy. L stands for lousy. So this is lousy cholesterol or very lousy cholesterol. When the LDL picks up the fat, it really does continually circulate in the body and occasionally will get stuck as plaque buildup, which clogs up the artery, and that's why it's poor. Now you see the word here, it's called lipoprotein. That means cholesterol. Lipo is a word, a prefix that means fat, and then protein obviously means protein. So cholesterol is actually made of fat and protein combined. And the high, when we see the word high, what they're indicating is that there's a high amount of protein in HDL. So there's a high amount of protein in HDL. We get to these ones, there's a low amount of protein in HDL, or a very low amount of protein in the LDL, sorry, the LDL. So it's really the makeup of the cholesterol molecule that determines whether it's good or bad. If there's a lot of protein, we call it HDL. There's not so much fat in the molecule. When there's a low amount of protein, that means there's a ton of fat in the LDL. And that's what the differential factor in terms of its makeup is. But think of happy cholesterol and lousy cholesterol. Okay, oops. So once a year, every adult should have a blood test. And during that blood test, we should be able to say we want to know what our cholesterol levels are. We want a healthy adult to have less than 200 parts of cholesterol in their body at any time. And then of that total blood cholesterol, hopefully it's less than 200. We want our happy cholesterol to be above 40. We want our lousy cholesterol to be less than 100. All right. And sometimes these numbers are skewed. Like I had a friend one time, her cholesterol was 250, total cholesterol was 250, but her HDL was 100. And I said, don't worry about it. You're fine. You've got such good happy cholesterol that you probably won't come down with the cardiovascular disease. On the other hand, if we had someone with 250 total cholesterol and their LDLs were 150, we would be worrying. We would know that a person that has a lot of lousy cholesterol, they're building up plaque in their arteries already. Now, I don't know how many of you know your numbers. I was always about 190 until I had kids. And then my cholesterol did go up slightly over, it was like 210 or something. And the doctors were actually telling me it's normal for a pregnant woman to have slightly elevated cholesterol. But you want to try to keep it within that range of about total being 200. Okay. So we'll talk about how to manipulate these numbers a bit and how we get more of one or the other. So if you're eating cholesterol, if you're eating any animal food, I should put it that way. If you're eating any animal food, beef, chicken, turkey, dairy products, ice cream, yogurt, things like that, cheese, if you're eating any animal food, it's going to be LDL. The cholesterol that's within that food will be LDL. Okay. Now, we don't have to eat any cholesterol whatsoever. We would still be able to live without eating cholesterol because our liver makes it. And in this image, you can see here that the liver could make cholesterol. Now, some of us make HDL and some make LDL. And this is the unique situation here. Depending on your genetics, predominantly genetics, there are other lifestyle factors as well. But what does our liver do? When it has to make cholesterol, will your liver make LDL or HDL? Well, unfortunately, in some families, due to genetics, it makes a lot of LDL. And this is how high cholesterol could run in families. Like I told you, all the guys on my dad's side have high cholesterol. Their liver is kicking out LDL constantly. But there's other factors too. It's not just genetics. Two big issues are stress and drug usage. Let's look at stress for a minute. Mental stress or physical stress? Mental stress, you're nervous, you're anxiety, you have problems we're worried about constantly. That's mental stress. That will definitely cause the liver to make LDL. The physical stress, the huge one, is not sleeping enough. We've got to sleep about 7 to 9 hours per 24-hour period. If we're not sleeping, our liver will kick out LDL. That's the sad thing. So you got to sleep. I know that some of you are shocked right now hearing that because I was a student at one point too, not sleeping a ton because you've got jobs, you've got family, you've got school. It's a lot. I know. And all those things cause mental stress too. But I have to make you aware of that. If we're under stress, our liver tends to make LDL. Now, let me give you the protective factor. When you exercise, your liver will make HDL. So even if you're under a lot of stress, try to be physically active and exercise. When we do physical activity and exercise, our liver starts making more HDL. And it doesn't have to be a marathon, just 30 minutes or more per day of physical activity. It's going to help your liver make HDL. So there's your protective mechanism in terms of why does exercise prevent heart disease? Because exercise will stimulate your liver to make HDL. It's awesome. If you're not doing it, 3 10-minute walks per day, 10-minute walk after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your liver is going to benefit making a bit more HDL. So we've talked about stress. We've talked about exercise. The other thing was drugs. If you're using any drug, the liver typically will make LDL. And why this happens is the liver does a lot of other things besides make cholesterol. The liver will detoxify drugs. We find that when the liver's detoxifying these drugs, it doesn't give a lot of effort to the cholesterol and it starts making more LDL. Seems like maybe it's easier for it to make LDL versus the HDL. And I'm talking any kind of drug, alcohol, cigarettes, smoking. I'm also talking prescription drugs and or illegal drugs. But when we're using drugs, we have to make sure that we're not doing anything unnecessary. So there is a time when you need to take drugs for medical purposes, but we don't want to be on those for long periods of time if there's an alternative. And one of them that I want to mention is birth control pills. People on birth control pills, sometimes their liver tends to make more LDL. I'm not going to say to somebody stop taking them, but what I would say is then we've got to watch our other factors. Exercise, eat healthy, so that we're not overloading our body with LDL. They actually tell women above the age of, I believe, 35 to try to find an alternative method of birth control because after that age of 35, the taking of birth control pills could increase the cholesterol, increase the risk of stroke. So then they start talking about other alternative methods. But we should know other drugs too, like alcohol is a huge one. When we're drinking alcohol, the body makes LDL. And I think that that might be a more common factor for many people, especially college students. Um, you may have heard that it helps, that alcohol helps. And here's the deal with alcohol. Like anything above moderate intake, you're going to get LDL. And moderate intake, we'll have a whole lesson on alcohol at the end of class this semester. 1 drink a day for a woman, 2 drinks a day for a guy. Anything above that, the liver's making LDL. All right. So there are some factors. If we're eating cholesterol, we don't want to eat more than 300 milligrams a day. It comes from animal foods. The primary one is eggs and butter, followed by any kind of meat. Your liver could make cholesterol, and I would say to you guys, what is your liver making based on the factors I've talked about? Is your liver making HDL or LDL based on the factors we've talked about? Did somebody have a question? Okay. Let me see something here. Let me just check the chat room really quick. There was a question about the birth control. I would definitely check with your doctor in terms of what type. I know there's so many different kinds of birth control at this point in time. But when we start changing the hormones of the body, clearly there's pros and cons. Any prescription drug will do this. There are pros to using the drugs, right? There's benefits to using the drugs. There will always be some type of side effect. And you know what we do when we choose to use a drug or not is determine, do the benefits outweigh the risks? And if that's the case, we use it, right? I have migraines. I am on a daily prescription for them. And I have to say to myself, do the benefits of not being in severe pain outweigh the risks of, you know, the drug potentially increasing my cholesterol a bit, or the drug potentially, you know, causing sleepiness or a side effect like that. So please, by no means, take my advice and say, oh, I got to stop taking all drugs. No, you weigh your pros and cons. Sometimes we need to take them. But read the side effects when you're getting a prescription. See what that's all about. And think to yourself, are there alternatives that I can use? Or what can I do? Like here's a perfect example. People go on these cholesterol drugs all the time. They get high cholesterol. The doctor wants to put them on a high cholesterol drug. Temporarily, that may be okay to use a high cholesterol drug to lower the total cholesterol. You go to the doctor and it says, oh, your cholesterol is 350. We got to get you on these drugs so you don't have a heart attack or stroke. Probably right. You don't want to have a heart attack or stroke. So you take the drugs to lower your total cholesterol. When you're doing that, they will cause a little bit of liver damage, those cholesterol drugs. So we're taking them temporarily. Can we make some changes in our life to lower the cholesterol in other levels too? Can we sleep more? Can we exercise? Can we start eating better? Here's a slide that shows you guys what the LDL does in the blood vessels. The LDL will build up plaque in your blood vessels. So when we're born, we have these normal clear arteries. Depending on some lifestyle factors and genetics is huge, we have buildup of artery plaque in our artery here. So whatever's at the end of this artery might not be getting enough blood flow. If this artery is leading to your brain or your heart, then we could have a heart attack or stroke because it's not getting enough blood flow. That blood contains oxygen and nutrients. And if the organs aren't getting enough blood flow, then they could potentially get damaged. So that's what LDL is doing. Now, how do I reverse this? Here's the deal. If you have someone you know that has total cholesterol that's more than 200, it's elevated. If they have high LDLs, there are things they can do to try to clear out this plaque themselves. Clearly, taking drugs is one option. What can we empower them to do for themselves? We're going to limit saturated fat, avoid trans fat altogether, but limit the saturated fat. So we're not eating as many animal products anymore. We're eating more plant-based foods, which would entail vegetables, fruits, whole grains, okay? We're going to avoid overeating because too many calories, just putting in that amount of calories, putting in the fat, our liver will have to make cholesterol to carry that fat. So we don't want to put in a lot of calories so that our liver has to make more cholesterol, right? The more fat you eat, the more cholesterol your liver is going to have to make. Then I want you to try to encourage them to lower their stress, to get more sleep, and eliminate unnecessary drugs. The foods we're going to eat, how to increase, the foods we want to increase, and I'm going to actually, the foods we're going to want to increase here, because we want to talk about positive stuff, right? We want to eat as much fiber as possible. And that comes with your whole grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. But the fiber actually will help lower the LDL, the more fiber you eat. I encourage my brother to eat oatmeal twice a day. If you know someone who has high cholesterol, it's a good breakfast food. It's also a good snack if a person is hungry. The oatmeal has a lot of that soluble fiber. And in research has showed us that oats are the #1 food to help lower cholesterol. You could do a high fiber cereal, obviously your fruit and veggies. So we're helping somebody we know to reduce their cholesterol. We don't want to just tell them what not to eat, but also what to eat. We want them exercising a bit. That will increase their exercise, will increase their HDL, while eating healthy will help lower their LDL. What are your questions on cholesterol? Let me go to the chat room and see if there's any questions. Raise your hand if you know someone who has high cholesterol. I got to raise my hand. At least half of us. I somehow raised my hand twice. You guys could lower your hand. So let's look at the chat room. There were a couple questions, and I will answer those. What do I think about Honey Nut Cheerios? Okay, the reason Cheerios got in trouble saying it prevents heart disease, but it is true, it does prevent heart disease, but it wasn't necessarily just Cheerios that does it, it's fiber. So because Cheerios has fiber in it, the fiber will help lower the LDL. And so, I don't know, there was some marketing scheme that they had, eat this, it's going to prevent heart disease. Personally, I think it's true, but somebody got mad about that, maybe a competitor, and didn't want them claiming that. Any food with fiber will help you lower cardiovascular disease risk, help you lower heart attack risk, stroke risk. We already know it helps lower diabetes and cancer as well. So high fiber, the better. I think that the breakfast cereals that are high in fiber are great options, but don't forget there's other things you can eat with whole grains and fibers in them. HDL and how high is LDL and how low HDL is bad, but okay. Well, you want to be around these numbers. Let me see if I can pull them back up. Let me show you again. We're going to talk more about this. We're not rushing through it and never discussing it again. We will talk more about these numbers when we talk about cardiovascular disease and diet. So we have a whole week that we're going to do cardiovascular disease and foods and diets, and we'll review these numbers again. But what they're saying is the doctors are wanting our LDL less than 100. If HDL greater than 40. Okay. If you're borderline, I wouldn't panic, but that would be a case of saying, well, let me exercise more. If I'm at like 37 as my HDL, let me exercise a little bit more. That'll get the HDL up. If I'm at like 120 with my LDL, well, let me take a couple steps to kind of lower that. Let me eat more fiber. Let me cut out some of the saturated fats, cut out some of the cholesterol I'm eating, but also don't forget to look at stress, sleep, and maybe the drug usage as well. And unfortunately, there are some people genetically, they're eating perfectly, they're exercising, and because of genetics, they still have a problem. Those are the kind of people that might need to stay on the cholesterol drugs for longer periods of time. Okay. We have to move on to protein today. We may potentially get it done. We have 20 minutes. Protein, I leave it for the last because it's the easiest, really. Can you see my screen with protein?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We need protein. We definitely want to eat protein in our diets, just like we want to say we're going to eat carbs and fat. We want better sources of protein. Here's some really pretty sources of protein. Any of the foods on here would be considered healthy as long as it's, in moderation. I know a lot of you guys like the avocados, so we see these avocados again. They do have healthy fat in them. They have some healthy protein as well. But these are some pretty colorful foods, right? When we see foods that are colorful, we know they're loaded with vitamins and mineral and fiber. So our diet should be about 20% protein for an active person. I do have that here. We want about 12 to 20% of our diet being protein. I think the textbook goes up to like 30% or 35%. But again, I think if you can aim for 20% and you go a plus or minus 10, you're good. You're good. So for most average active adults, I'm going to go with 20%. People that are building more tissues of the human body, maybe they want to go up to 25%. That would be fine. So the function is to build and repair tissues of the body. And this is a really good slide to show you guys. Let me zoom in here. That the protein actually builds everything, not just muscle. I think a lot of people get stuck that protein equals muscle. Protein will also build your blood, the intestines of your body, your heart, your skin, your brain, your muscles, your blood vessels, everything, your liver, your teeth, everything. Okay. So how did I get to the end? That is not right yet. It just pulled me right to the end. So here's some pretty sources of protein. It's made of amino acids, and there's 20 different amino acids. Some of these you heard before. They break them up a little bit here. Essential you have to eat because our body doesn't make them. The non-essential your body will make. But there's 20 different amino acids. We want to eat a variety of foods like you see here to make sure we're getting all of them. Don't get stuck in saying I eat chicken every day and I only eat chicken and I don't eat anything but chicken, because you're not going to get all amino acids. You want to eat a variety of foods. The protein builds and repairs tissues of the body, so we need to make sure we're eating enough. About 20% of our daily intake, plus or minus even 10 on the higher end. Protein does not really contribute to our energy of our body. When we need energy, we use carbs and fat. We never really burn protein for energy. We use the protein to build and repair the tissues of the body. Why is it doing that to me? I think I'm pushing the wrong button. We use protein to build and repair tissues of the body. If you had absolutely no carbohydrates in your body, then you can change protein into a carbohydrate and you use that carbohydrate for energy. And that's why there's 4 calories. If we change the protein into a carb and use the carb for energy, you would get 4 proteins out of that carb. 4 calories out of that carb. That only happens when you don't eat carbs. And we'll talk a bit about that. I know you were talking about ketone diets and stuff like that. We'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, what you're going to do, get out a piece of paper and maybe a calculator if you need it. You're going to determine how many grams of protein you need for your personal intake per day. And the way we find this out is we have to determine what your weight is in kilograms. To do that, you want to take how much you weigh in pounds and divide that by 2.2. So do that first. if you have your phone near you or you need to do a quick math equation, however much you weigh in pounds divided by 2.2 will give you how much you weigh in calories. Excuse me, in kilograms. Oh my gosh. Does somebody have a question in the chat room? Let me check. So all you're doing right now is finding how much you weigh in kilograms. So yes, Journey, you have posted that. Your total weight divided by 2.2. Okay. Once you find out your total weight divided by 2.2, that's how much you weigh in kilograms. We multiply your weight in kilograms by a factor of anywhere from 0.8 to 1.7 grams per kilogram per day. This could actually go up to 2.0. I just reviewed the textbook this morning and they changed it to 2.0. So you're going to pick a number between 0.8 and 2.0. And you multiply that number by how much you weigh in kilograms, and that is how many grams of protein you should eat in one day. So let me give you an example. Here's an example. You take your current pounds divided by 2.2, and that's how much you weigh in kilograms. We multiply that by a factor 0.8 to 2.0. I like easy math, so I always pick 1. Isn't that silly? Example, how many grams of protein per day should a person who weighs 150 consume? The first thing we do is we divide 150 by 2.2, and we get about 68, we'll say 68 kilograms, 68 kilograms. A moderately active person who weighs 68 kilograms should eat 68 grams of protein. See the 1.0 factor? So easy. That's for a moderately active person. Well, if you think you're really highly active, you're exercising 3 times or more per week, you're an athlete, maybe you pick a higher number. Maybe you pick 1.5 as your factor. So we multiply this factor, 1.5, times your weight in kilograms, and this person would be about 102 grams of protein per day. What the book does tell us is a sedentary person who sits a lot, unfortunately, if you got a job where you're sitting a lot, maybe you only need 0.8 grams per day. So the question in your mind, and we'll have to do this when we talk about metabolism again, is what factor do I pick? If I'm, right now I'm picking 1 because it's winter, I'm in the house a lot, I'm doing chores, which is pretty active, but I'm not really going outside and jogging and playing baseball and softball like I normally do. In the summer, I'm doing those things, bike riding. So for right now, I'm picking 1. But you guys got to decide for yourself. What are your questions? So Talea, that's a good question. Are you going to speak on that?
Yeah, this is really helpful for me because once again, because I've had this chronic kidney disease since, I was a child, kind of getting my mindset in the nutrition needs of a healthy person, it's a really hard thing to do. That's why I was thinking about going into renal dietetics, just because it's more of what I'm familiar with, but I definitely need to know, this is really, really helpful because since I was a kid, even the word protein was an alarming thing to me. I have to be careful about this and how I eat it. So it's really interesting because most of the books on the market and aids that have to do with weight loss or just healthy eating in general usually consist of a higher amount of protein intake that I could never have. So this is really, really interesting.
Yeah. And remember, guys, what I'm teaching is that apparently healthy adult, if, like Talea, you have a condition that, requires a change, note that, right? So I don't want anybody, thinking, oh, I have to eat this. If you have a condition that is different, you would be considered in one of those special populations. You have to alter your diet based off of what an apparently healthy adult eats. Interestingly enough, it's maybe about half, right, Talea? About half of what the recommendations really are, what they're telling you to eat based on your condition.
Yeah, because I mean, within a week, I leak over 1,000 grams of protein. It's kind of ridiculous, but yeah. It doesn't, my body doesn't absorb it. I don't, unfortunately, because my kidneys aren't
Okay.
working. My body doesn't work, absorb it. And it really does. It's interesting that you were like learning about what it does as far as, with our tissue and scar, that explains why it's really hard for me to heal in different ways.
True. Yeah, so you have to be extra careful not to get any injuries or things like that if you're not able to use that protein efficiently. Let me show you guys a screen here. You should by now, and if you have questions, raise your hand. You should by now have a good idea of how much protein you should eat in a day. Most people are between 50 and 100 grams. Now the question then becomes is, can you get that from your diet? And obviously these animal foods have more protein than the non-animal foods. But what I can say is we have to watch our animal intake of protein in general. Yes, it's the quickest way to get protein in your body, but there are some harm that could come from high animal diets, right? Every nutritionist and doctor you meet will tell you a plant-based diet is healthier. Although I'm not a vegetarian, I do eat some meat. We can't overdo that. We can't. And you'll learn about why today, but also as we move through class. If we talk about protein intake and we look at beef, poultry, seafood, pork, make a fist, look at your fist. That is one serving size of beef, poultry, seafood, or pork for you. It's about 3 ounces. We get about 25 grams of protein in the size of your fist. And I think that a lot of people overeat animal products. If you look at the size of your fist, think about eating a piece of chicken that size. It has 25 grams of protein. If you eat double that, you're going to get 50 grams of protein. It's a quick way to get protein by eating the animal products. But know that the size of your fist gives you about 25 grams of protein if it's an animal. Dairy products have anywhere from 10 grams, milk, yogurt. Look at cottage cheese. It's always amazing to me. I always think, oh my gosh, it's got to be a typo. No, cottage cheese has a ton of protein. 24 grams, almost as much as meat for a cup of cottage cheese. So if you're not someone who likes meat, but you are still someone who will eat dairy, that's a good option. We can get protein from non-animal sources. You can get complete protein from non-animal sources. You just got to eat a lot of them. There are people who will say, no, there's no way you can get enough protein without eating animals. You can. Beans, nuts, soy products, you just got to eat a lot of them, okay, to get to the level you need to be at. I'm going to leave this up here. Does someone have a question? Because I heard a little bing in the chat room. Do you guys
I was
think...
just putting, yep, when you were talking about...
Talking about what?
No, I was just saying I was agreeing with you when you were talking about the meat consumption.
Yeah, there's cultural reasons we eat a lot of meat in Chicagoland. I don't know where you guys all were born. I was born in this area. We have this cultural connotation in Chicagoland that we need to eat meat to be healthy. And that stems from years ago, there was a meat processing center. The largest one in the nation was in Chicago. It was called the Stockyards. And they would basically butcher meat, butcher animals. And lots of people were employed there. When they would butcher the animals, right, they would want the community to eat what they were working on so they could maintain their jobs. But they would have cows and pigs and lambs and everything in the city, right in downtown Chicago, more in the toward the south end, but really downtown Chicago was the Stockyards. Anyway, so they told all their family and friends, the people that work there, you got to eat meat to be healthy. If you don't eat meat, you can't be healthy. Well, that little myth really is still living in today's society. People around here think we've got to eat a lot of meat. Texas is the same way. They think that you got to eat a lot of meat to be healthy, which could put us in a bad situation because, again, maybe it's too many calories, maybe it's too much saturated fat. There are alternatives for protein. You could just be as healthy as eating these beans and nuts, but you just got to eat more of them. Here are some plant-based proteins. You guys can refer to this. Know that whole grains have it. Quinoa, oats, brown rice will have a bit, like 5 to 10 grams per serving. Where's my oats? 7 grams of protein in a half a cup of dry oats. So you can get it. Look at the beans, 15 grams per serving for a cup of beans. Did someone have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So for
Okay.
oats, does it matter what kind? Like, 'cause there's like steel cut ones, rolled oats, like all the different kinds.
Most of them will be the same. It's just different how they are cut or broken. It should still be a whole grain though. Rolled or steel cut, it's just the way that they're cut up.
Okay.
Whole oats is fine. You'll get the actual whole thing. The steel cut is still a whole grain, but it's just cut in half. Or rolled, they break it apart, but it's still a whole grain. It's cheaper just to get the regular container of oats and not the packages. The little packages, like they call them instant oatmeal, it usually has sugar and flavors in them. It costs more money, but you're getting like a little added, like maybe some preservatives or sugar. You can just make regular oats in 2 minutes. It's not much more instant, than that. Add your own nuts and seeds and fruit, and it's a better option than the packaged oatmeal. There's a little chart you can refer to here in terms of, am I getting enough in your diet? Your discussion question this week will tell you, how much protein do you need? And do you get enough in your diet? So you need to review kind of these slides or your textbook. A lot of these are in the text, these pictures, to make sure you're getting that amount, whether it's 60 grams or 100 grams. Can you eat that much? If you can't eat that much, maybe you do want a supplementation. So I want to go through problems of not enough or too much protein in a minute here. Problems of not enough protein. So if you are not eating that amount that you found out today, let's say on average we have a person needs 60 grams of protein and they're not eating that amount. They have an increased risk of these problems on the screen here. Weakened immune system is one of them. Typically, they're going to get sick more often. Their metabolism might be a little bit slow, so they're carrying a little extra weight potentially, maybe increased risk of bone fractures or anemia. This is if a person isn't eating enough protein, okay? Now, the opposite of that, there are a lot of people that eat too much, and I come across people that exercise all the time. They say, I have to eat a lot of protein because I'm an athlete or I exercise, and they think it's going to build their muscle. I always say to them, eating more doesn't make your hair grow faster or your skin grow stronger. Well, we need to eat that amount, whether that be 60 grams. Once you hit that amount, eating more doesn't make your muscles grow more, nor does it make your hair grow more or your skin or your bones grow more. You got to get that number of whatever your recommendation was, 60 grams. If we eat more than that, so we're saying we're eating a lot more protein than our body needs. The biggest factor is that's converted to fat. So you know how we convert extra carbs to fat? Your body will convert extra protein into fat and store it as body fat. So we don't want that. We don't want to put on more body fat. Some of the protein is broken down and excreted in the urine, which this happens a lot, especially if you're not eating carbs. So there are these diets that will tell you, don't eat carbohydrates. Instead, just eat protein and fat. So we know that carbs are essential for our brain. You have to eat them to survive. You would die if you had no carbohydrates, flat out die, because your brain can't use anything but carbs. So in order to stay alive on a no carbohydrate or low carbohydrate diet, like keto diet or Atkins diet, what the body will do is it changes the extra protein you're intaking into a carbohydrate. And that is through a process called ketoacidosis. I'll come back to this slide in a moment. Ketoacidosis. So we're changing a protein into a carbohydrate, and we're using that carbohydrate to fuel our brain and our body. You actually getting yourself sick. Sometimes when you get sick, you lose weight. Like you get the flu, you're going to lose weight. When you are on one of these keto diets or Atkins diet, it is effective for losing weight, because what's happening is you're basically starving your body of the energy it needs because you're not eating enough carbs. But in order to survive, you're putting yourself in a state of ketoacidosis, where a protein molecule is being broken down and changed into a carbohydrate molecule. And this happens in a process called gluconeogenesis. You can see it on the screen here. When protein is broken down or goes through gluconeogenesis, there are byproducts that are released: water, nitrates, ammonia, ketones, and uric acid. So if we're changing that protein into a carb because you're not eating carbs, gluconeogenesis will occur. The byproducts will get you sick. If you're doing this for long periods of time, these byproducts coming out of that chemical change could potentially get you sick. And I have some things listed for you here. Ketoacidosis is a blood poisoning. And when that happens, you're sick. Basically, it's a disease. You do lose weight. So it is effective, but it's not healthy. It's not healthy to do it that way. People on these all protein diets also have a lot of dehydration. You got to worry about that. So what I can say about keto diet or Atkins diet, you got to eat carbs, okay? And if a diet tells you don't eat carbs, they're putting you into a situation where they want you to get this ketoacidosis. That's really an illness that is blood poisoning, and you're going to lose weight, but it's not really healthy. I really can't stress that enough. You have to eat carbs. If the diet is telling you to eat fruits and vegetables, I think that's a good option. And especially if they say eat as much fruit and vegetable as you want, those are your carbs. Focus on that. Don't eliminate carbs from your diet. Now, we were talking about problems of not enough or too much protein in the diet. The other issue I want you to look at and research, and then I'll let you go for the day, is high animal protein diets do increase our risk of cancer. And we're saying high. Again, if you're eating the size of your fist once or twice per day, you're good. But if you're eating more than that every day of your life, it does increase the risk of cancers. So you've got to watch that, right? Your intake, don't overdo it. I'm not advocating giving up animal products. That you've got to make that decision yourself. And that really is about it for protein. We're a minute late, so what I'm going to do is, if you have questions, stick around. Otherwise, we will review next week protein, and then we're going to start vitamins and minerals. Make sure you do your 2 quizzes and 2 discussion questions. They're due tomorrow night. I will stick around, guys, if you have questions. Otherwise, if you came in late, raise your hand. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Stay safe if we're getting more cold and snow. I'm looking on the screen here to see. Journey, I think I have you for attendance. Odie, let's see. Odie, I have you for attendance. And Jose, I do have you for attendance. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Oh, thank you. Let me look, Rolando. Hold on. I got you now. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Okay, bye-bye.